1984, Brighton, on England's Channel coast. It's the middle of the night. Suddenly, there's a huge explosion at the Grand Hotel.
I realized that the building was collapsing around about us.
I had no doubt at all that I was going to die, none whatsoever.
Hundreds of people are trapped inside. Fire brigade teams scramble to the scene.
We had no idea what we were going to.
None of them has ever seen a disaster on this scale.
It was just a scene of absolute devastation.
For the next 7 hours, the firemen must rely on their personal courage, while their ingenuity is tested to the very limit. The annual conference of Britain's ruling Conservative Party. It's Margaret Thatcher's 5th year as Prime Minister. But British politics are haunted by the spectre of terrorism. Since the early 1970s, the Irish Republican Army has waged a campaign of violence against British rule in Northern Ireland. Many people have been killed in IRA strikes, in Ireland and on mainland Britain, including random bomb attacks on pubs packed with innocent people. In the autumn of 1984, they launch another attack, this one unprecedented in its audacity. People from very different walks of life will come to depend on each other to survive. The leading cabinet minister, an outspoken political ally of the Prime Minister. The conference organizer, looking forward to the birth of his first child. The delegate who hears the blast and bravely rushes to help. The fire brigade officer who's first on the scene and who must make the decisions on which other people's lives will depend. Tonight, they'll be bound together by a unique and terrible experience. The Brighton conference is almost at an end. Over the past 4 days, 4,500 Conservative members have debated the party's agenda for the coming year. All over Brighton, party members, including the Prime Minister and cabinet officials, have enjoyed the traditional last night celebrations. A few hours ago, Trade and Industry Secretary Norman Tebbit received a standing ovation. He's seen as Margaret Thatcher's possible successor to the party leadership. Now in the early hours, Norman and his wife Margaret have returned to their second-floor room at the Grand Hotel, the nerve centre of the conference, where the Prime Minister and more than 100 Conservative delegates are staying.
We'd been to a party or two and had then gone to bed, I suppose, fairly soon after midnight, 1 o'clock, something like that. Quite early by the standards of last evenings of party conferences.
5 floors above the Tebbits, in room 729, Harvey Thomas is also winding down after 4 very hectic days.
Those of us who'd been working on the conference were pretty exhausted. I'd been rehearsing her speech with Mrs. Thatcher until about 11 o'clock, and then she had to do some social rounds, so she said, why don't you get some sleep?
The Prime Minister herself is still working. In the first floor Napoleon suite, she's putting the finishing touches to her closing speech for tomorrow. What happens over the next 7 hours will bring her to rewrite it completely.
when I found myself flying through the air, I had no doubt at all that I was going to die, none whatsoever.
It was total, absolute blackness. Everything was pitch dark, and I had no idea how far we'd fallen or which way up we were or anything else.
The Grand Hotel's alarm system automatically triggers an emergency 999 call. 14 kilometres away, headquarters of the East Sussex County Fire Brigade in Lewes. The emergency call activates a tape-recorded voice.
Fire, Grand Hotel, Brighton.
The headquarters immediately alerts the nearest station, Preston Circus, just 3 kilometres from the Grand Hotel. Every fire brigade station maintains teams on 24-hour standby, divided into watches. Red, white, blue and green. Tonight, Green Watch are on duty. Station officer Fred Bishop is in charge.
The alarm was sounded and we just got a message saying, go to the Grand Hotel, 3 appliances, the fire alarm's ringing, and that's all we knew.
28 seconds later, Green Watch are on their way. 11 men in 3 fire engines.
On the way down, we just discussed what we might find there. We often went to hotels and, for fire alarms ringing, and most of the time they were false alarms or something that happened very minor. Very rarely was it a major incident. So we had no idea what we were going to.
They hadn't heard the blast, but others have. Surgeon David Skidmore, an enthusiastic rank-and-file member of the Conservative Party, is staying in a hotel only 300 metres from the Grand.
I was just woken up by this huge bang. It was pretty clear that something very serious had happened.
He'd been expecting that day to begin with a jog along the seafront.
So just grabbed my tracksuit and trainers off the bedside chair and raced out.
As they approach the hotel, Bishop sees this is no false alarm. He can't even get the vehicles in close. Metal crowd barriers have been blasted into the street and blocked their path. While his men clear the way, Bishop tries to make sense of what's happened. It looks like an explosion, maybe a catastrophic gas leak. But with so many members of the government staying here, he quickly reaches a different conclusion. It's a bomb.
You could see the devastation that had been caused. So I just had to think, well, it probably is a bomb, knowing that's the Conservative Party conference.
Bishop's trained for this kind of emergency, though he's never dealt with a bomb attack for real. The regulations are specific. He should contain the damage from outside and wait for the Army bomb squad to check the buildings clear of other bombs. He's in a dilemma. The bomb squad will take precious time to get there, and every second waiting risks lives. But if he sends Green Watch inside, he's risking their lives as well.
And so I had the decision to make, what was I going to do? And I just said to all my crews, I wasn't going to order them in, but I'm going in. There's obviously people need rescuing. We need to help as quickly as possible.
His team know the risks as well as he does.
And of course, everybody said, well, if you're going in, Governor, we're coming in with you. And that was the end of it. So that's how we started.
Bomb or not, Bishop acts as he would at any emergency involving a fire or damaged building. First, he divides his small team. The drivers in charge of the 3 engines begin standard procedures, unloading equipment and running out hoses. The rest, just 7 men carrying torches and hand tools. Bishop leads into the large, darkened building. Firemen from Green Watch are the first to arrive at the bombed Grand Hotel. They need to get everyone out quickly, but they have to move cautiously. The building may collapse, and there could even be a second bomb. Fred Bishop has only 7 men to get hundreds of people out of a building 7 stories high, with 165 bedrooms. Straight away, he realizes he needs backup, and radios East Sussex Fire Brigade Control requesting 10 more fire engines and crews. 30 to 40 more men. He then decides to head immediately to the topmost floors. His men quickly begin evacuating people downwards, to be sure they have everyone out in case the weakened structure begins to give way. Inside, the terrorists have failed even to touch their #1 target, who's already making a lucky escape. The bomb blast has reached Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher's suite, but only destroyed the bathroom. She gathers only a few things, including her speech, while her armed special branch bodyguards look for a way out of the shattered building. Gunmen could be waiting outside the front, so instead they head for a side exit, where they evacuate the Prime Minister by car. But for one of her closest cabinet colleagues, Norman Tebbit, the ordeal is just beginning. He's buried beneath tons of rubble.
I really don't quite know which way up I was. All I could find that I'd got around me was timber and brickwork and rubbish of one kind or another, just in debris.
He's only meters away from where Green Watch men are unloading equipment on the ground floor, but he might as well be in a different world.
One is cut off from sound from outside. We certainly didn't hear the sirens of fire engines arriving or anything like that.
Dr. David Skidmore reaches the ground from his nearby hotel just after the fireman.
I could hear people screaming and shouting from way up high. So I said, I'm a doctor. Went straight up the stairs, 4 or 5 floors up to go and see what was actually going on.
Streetlights shine through the shattered walls. The fire alarm is overwhelming.
In the end, I got quite frustrated and said to somebody, shut that flaming alarm off, go find it and turn it off, because it was driving us mad.
For the first time in his career, Fred Bishop has to cope with a real terrorist bomb attack. It's not at all how he thought it would be.
The most eerie thing about it was almost like being on this film set. It was, you expected to see people screaming, running, shouting, but there wasn't. There was no indication of panic. Nobody was running around screaming and shouting.
Survivors emerge into the cold seafront air. Just minutes ago, they were relaxing after the party or were asleep in bed. Now they're bewildered, disorientated. Some are injured. Many are in shock. TV news teams in Brighton to cover the conference find themselves capturing scenes from a war zone as emergency personnel lead away many well-known members of the British government. Fire brigade reinforcements are racing to the aid of Green Watch from stations all over the Brighton area. Perhaps hundreds of people are trapped. Now Bishop's got to work out how to rescue them. The blast was on one of the uppermost floors of this 120-year-old Victorian building. The bomb, hidden behind a bathroom panel, has exploded between rooms 628 and 629, leaving a 12-meter wide hole in the hotel's front. Rooms on the 4th, 5th and 6th floors are ripped open to the night sky. Then, seconds after the blast, the damage gets even worse. The explosion has weakened the exposed 3.5-meter stack of one of the Grand's brick chimneys. Moments later, it collapses. Crashing through the blast hole, the chimney stack then shears sideways. It takes 5 entire rooms with it to the ground floor, where they land in a heap of wreckage 2 stories high. The collapse has destroyed or damaged rooms and corridors on every one of the 6 floors.
That's where people were finding it difficult to get out. They may be trapped in their room, having opened the door, found there's no corridor outside.
The firemen guide these people down to safety through the damaged parts of the hotel. David Skidmore is going in the opposite direction. He's following the sound of people screaming, making his way up what remains of the staircase. As a doctor, he knows even simple first aid can make all the difference. If he can reach injured people, he may be able to save lives. At last he reaches what remains of room 629, near the very top of the blast zone. This is right where the bomb exploded. Most of the room has been simply blown away, and yet there's someone still alive. It's Muriel MacLean, the wife of Donald MacLean, the Conservative Scottish Secretary. There's no sign of him. She's pinned down by wreckage. Right next to her bed, there's a sheer 21-meter drop. She's escaped the collapse by just a meter.
Mrs. MacLean was trapped on the bed with an obvious fracture of her leg. The leg was distorted.
Firemen begin carefully freeing her from the wreckage, all the time mindful of the terrifying drop. They need to get her out of the building to safety. But how? Taking her down 5 flights of debris-strewn stairs is too dangerous. There's only one solution. A piece of equipment Green Watch have never used like this before. They have 3 fire engines parked down below. The first 2, a pump and a pump escape, have ladders with a maximum reach of 13.5 and 18 meters, only long enough to reach the 3rd story. Muriel MacLean is on the 6th, 21 meters up. But there's a 3rd fire engine, the TL, or turntable ladder. Its 30-meter reach should get to the 6th floor. The telescopic extending ladder is mounted on a hydraulic 360-degree rotating turntable, so that it can be positioned right alongside a damaged building. It has another unique quality that sets it aside from Green Watch's other vehicles.
It had a cage at the top of the ladder, so that you could use it very much like a hydraulic platform. You could put people or equipment in the cage. You could attach a stretcher. It was quite a big advance at that time.
But it's the newest piece of equipment Green Watch have. They've never tried it in this kind of situation before. They need to work fast. Muriel's condition is worsening. The TL might be new and untried in action, but what Reed and the others can trust to here is their training.
And you'd go around the town, you'd find a building and you'd pitch to it, just to get familiar with where you are, where you can get in, where you can get the appliance in.
They've trained right here at the Grand before. Normal procedure is to pitch or position the TL's ladder so the cage is alongside a solid part of the building, like a window ledge, where people can escape. Time's short. Muriel needs evacuating now. Reed attempts something he's never done before. He extends the TL's ladder right alongside the bomb-blasted hole that was once room 629's wall. It's not easy. Reed has to judge it by eye from where he is 21 meters below on the TL's cab. The arm gets closer until it's parallel with the shattered room. The fireman and Skidmore carefully lift Muriel on the special rescue stretcher. One slip and any one of them could fall. A few moments later, and the cage is lowered away from the shattered room. Muriel is clear. Chris Reed has done it. The TL has turned out to be extremely effective when lives are at stake.
This was its first real job in action, and very useful it proved to be.
Muriel MacLean is the first seriously injured victim to be evacuated. The Brighton seafront is now packed with emergency vehicles, including 24 fire engines, as fire brigade reinforcements join the operation. More than 50 guests have escaped from the bombed Grand Hotel. Firemen know for sure that there's no blaze, but for the people left inside, each passing minute is more anxious than the last. Inside, the upper floors are now clear. Bishop's team keep moving, working their way through the lower corridors.
I had men checking through all the other rooms to see what people are still in their rooms, to get them out, finding other people who were trapped.
Far below them, on the ground floor, hidden under tons of debris, Norman Tebbit lies trapped.
When one's deprived of almost all sensory information, it's very difficult to know how time is passing. You're not sure whether you've been unconscious for a while, and if so, how long. And time doesn't have very much meaning.
There's no reliable list of exactly who's safe, so the firemen don't know that Tebbit and his wife are missing, let alone where in the rubble they're buried. All around the edge of the deep shaft created by the fallen chimney stack, there are jagged, unstable ledges. The firemen can't move or search quickly through the damage, for fear that areas might give way. The explosion ruptured the hotel's water tanks in the roof. Ice-cold water is leaking down through the building. Green Watch firemen are now working alongside crews from other areas, called in by Lewis Control. The aftermath of a terrorist bombing is a shocking new experience for these men too. One team from Hove Fire Station is checking the rooms along what's left of the 5th floor corridor, where it gives way abruptly to the gaping cavity. It's the first time leading fireman Ken Towner has seen the huge rent torn by the bomb.
If you looked out to the right, out into the void, you could see right across the sea, and there was nothing above us, except parts of the building, floor joists sticking out, masonry.
Harvey Thomas is lying just meters away from them in the dark.
They clearly hadn't heard me. You know, when you call somebody and they're talking together, you can tell they haven't heard. Then everything stopped, and I heard somebody say, "Quiet, quiet. There's somebody alive down there."
We could hear a voice. Not very loud, but there was a voice asking for help.
Towner moves gingerly towards the sound. He's horrified to discover that there's a body right on the verge of the deep drop. Harvey Thomas had been in room 729 on the top floor, directly above the bomb. It blasted him up through the ceiling, and then he fell 6 meters down through his room, and Muriel McLean's too, 1 flight below.
Crashing down, I remember that coming to a halt and a huge pile of what turned out to be tons of rubble coming on top of me.
He's been amazingly lucky. Somehow he's come to rest on the 5th floor, precariously balanced on a ledge, and he's pinioned by tons of debris.
I was sort of lying on my back, and I couldn't move at all.
He's helpless, trapped fast by the weight of wreckage on top of him. He has little idea just how difficult it will be for the firemen to rescue him. Leading fireman Ken Towner carefully picks his way towards Harvey Thomas. Every step takes Towner closer to the splintered edge of a sheer void.
There was all the debris and rubble all around, timber, masonry. Bear in mind that this was in the dark as well.
If Harvey had fallen just inches to the left or right, he would have plummeted straight down into the chasm below. The ledge he's trapped on slopes down into the 5-story drop, and it's unstable. Too much extra weight could cause it to break away and fall down, taking Harvey with it. Somehow Towner has got to get him back off the ledge, but he's stuck fast under the wreckage.
He was trapped under quite heavy bulks of timber and various other bits of masonry. So he was really pinned down.
Towner can't tell for sure how badly Harvey is injured. And there's another problem.
Cold water was pouring down, and what was happening was it was coming down, hitting my face about here, but my face was lying backwards. So it was trying to get up my nose and into my mouth, and of course I couldn't really swallow because it's very difficult with tons of rubble on your chest.
The water is making the ledge slippery and even more treacherous. Suddenly, Harvey realizes to his horror that he's under threat from more than just cold water.
I could also hear this sparkling sound. And of course the electric cables had been broken. And what was happening was that the water from these tanks was pouring down, hitting the electric cables and jumping around. Now the water was pouring down on me. So that did worry me a little bit. I thought that sooner or later the electricity is going to get conducted through the water.
Fred Bishop has ordered that the electrical supply be cut off. But that's easier said than done. It's impossible for all the power to be switched off in one go.
I guess there were so many different circuits. Some were alive and some were dead. So we didn't know which ones were which, and that was the biggest problem with electricity, because obviously you can't see whether it's alive or dead until you actually touch it.
Towner can't see where the cables are. Some are under the rubble beneath them. Others hang down from the edge of the void. If just one of the loose cables touches the water close by, they could both be electrocuted. He tries to keep Harvey calm.
And there was constant water just dropping down, just running down all the time. So I tended to lean over him to protect him from the water, because he couldn't move.
All the while, Towner's trying to work out how to go about freeing Harvey. The main obstacle is a heavy wooden door panel. It's stopping Harvey breathing properly.
It wasn't a matter of just pulling him out. It was a matter of having to lift the debris and the rubble off. And it was trying to work out the best way to do that.
Towner knows he isn't strong enough to move the door panel on his own. But he can't risk another man moving onto the ledge. It could collapse at any moment. If he can just get the right tools, he may still be able to get Harvey out.
In those days, we didn't have such a range of equipment as they've got these days. We were confined, really, to basic hand tools and equipment that we may have used on road traffic accidents.
He sends a message down to the backup fire crews outside the Grand. What he's looking for is standard on nearly every fire brigade vehicle. It's a set of rescue equipment called the EPCO kit. Firemen use the kit primarily to free victims from car wrecks, to force openings or lift heavy weights. The main component is a hydraulic ram powered by compressed air from bottles, or a small hand pump. Up on the 5th floor, as close to the ledge as he dares, one of Towner's men sets up the hand pump. Towner himself uses the hydraulic head. He's got to get it under the heavy panel that's pinning Harvey.
They said, okay, now what we're going to have to do, Harvey, we're going to try and lift hydraulically some of the stuff off you. And we want to do this as quickly as we can. To which I said, well, actually, chaps, so do I.
There's a gap of just a few inches beneath the panel. But now the EPCO comes into its own, as it has several different shapes and sizes of attachments.
It was very limited to how much space we had. So we had to use what they call alligator spreaders. And they're like a jaw, like that. You push it in, it goes in very tight, and when you give the command, you actually pump them and they open up.
He slides the alligator spreaders under the heavy panel pinning Harvey's chest and gives the command to start pumping. They have to go steady. A sudden jerk could upset the precariously balanced ledge.
I wasn't worried about me, but I began to worry about my wife. I thought the baby won't have a daddy, and Marlies won't have a husband. And that was upsetting me. So it was them I was praying for much more than myself down there.
Slowly, millimeter by millimeter, he opens the alligator spreader. If they spring apart, it could jolt the ledge. Towner will fall along with Harvey. Finally, the door begins to move upwards. While the heavy weight's supported, Towner has to take the chance and try to pull Harvey out.
And I said, you've got to push. When you push and I pull, we do it together.
You ready? Pull, pull, pull. And they pulled like mad.
We attempted about 3 times before he actually started to move, and he said, I'm moving, I'm moving.
I was kind of trying. I had a nail in my foot, and it was a bit painful, but I just tried to kick everything I could.
We eventually, between us, pulled him out. He came out a bit like a cork out of a bottle.
Out I came and popped down there, cut and bruised, but basically no bones broken.
The rescue's taken just under 2 hours. A news crew in the corridor right behind the ledge records the final moments of his rescue.
The firemen recognise him. He's Harvey Thomas, the organiser of this year's Tory party conference.
The amazing thing when you look at the film of it is that here we are in this total chaos everywhere, with rubble everywhere, and me looking like, you know, eyes like this, and this fireman comes back with a beautifully clear, clean cup with beautifully crystal clear water in it, and nobody ever knows where that water came from. To this day, I haven't found anybody who can answer the question.
Fred Bishop's Green Watch and the other emergency teams have been at work for nearly 3 hours. So far, they've freed 4 victims from the tangled ruins. But just meters away from them, Norman Tebbit, one of the Conservative Party's most important politicians, still lies immobilized beneath tons of wreckage.
I didn't really know whether I'd lost one arm or not. It felt cold and rather awful, and I wondered whether it was somebody else who'd been killed lying there.
Bishop's men are still working with the constant fear that the building might collapse at any time. In fact, they've had a lucky break. The Grand Hotel's solid Victorian architecture has actually proved largely impervious to the blast. The hotel is built around a core of chimneys at right angles to the walls. This creates a matrix of strong, inter-supporting cells. The effect of the explosion was confined to just one of those cells, immediately around room 629. The rooftop chimney stack collapsed, but the rest of the chimney running up through the building has remained intact, supporting the overall structure. And that's not all. The sought-after front sea view rooms have wrought iron balconies. They've helped to hold the masonry in place. The building is more stable than the rescuers think. But now the police send an urgent message. Another bomb might be primed to explode. The warning reaches the fire crews and David Skidmore, deep inside the building.
They wanted everybody out. It could have been a hoax, it could have been true, we didn't know. But I think when you're doing things like that, you're very focused. I think just everybody took the decision, well, there were a lot of badly injured people around, and we just carry on and get them all out.
All the crews resolved to keep on working. They've located and released the injured people from most of the upper floors. Now they focus attention on the most devastated part of the Grand. It's here that the most complicated rescue is about to take place. 6 entire floors from around the chimney stack have collapsed into a compact mound of debris. Even for experienced firemen, it's intense.
But it was just a scene of absolute devastation. There was this huge pile of rubble, beds, doors, all sorts of stuff, going up about 30 feet.
The base of this heap of rubble has crashed inside the hotel's main entrance. It seems impossible that anyone could still be alive. And yet it's here that firemen hear muffled voices, only barely audible, coming from somewhere within the rubble.
Then we just had to call for silence and literally call out, can anybody hear us? And once we could hear voices, then obviously we had to work towards that voice, keep them talking to get some idea of exactly where they were. Because obviously a voice in the rubble could be coming from anywhere.
Bishop and the others zero in on the voices. They don't realize it, but they found Norman Tebbit and his wife Margaret. They've been trapped now for more than 3 hours.
We heard voices, and we realize now, or afterwards, that it was Fred and his colleagues calling out. It was then a somewhat strange conversation between Fred and my wife.
We called to her, "Who's that in there?"
She replying, "Who's that up there?"
I think jokingly, I said, "Well, I asked the question first," which kind of got a rapport going between us. And then she said who she was, and she said her husband was there as well, and we were talking to them.
That's when really the rescue phase began, so far as we were concerned.
The Green Watch team have worked out where the Tebbits are. But now Bishop begins to appreciate just how much of a challenge this rescue will be. Up to this point, Norman Tebbit has focused simply on staying alive. Now that he can hear the firemen getting closer, his emotions begin to change.
In a way, one becomes more anxious. One knows that there is the possibility of getting out and getting out alive. So it goes from just long-term survival to, hey, let's get out of this.
Bishop tries to get a picture of exactly where the Tebbits are. He can't actually see them. They're suspended in debris about 2.5 meters above where hotel reception used to be. Margaret in front of Norman. Bishop is astonished that they survived the fall. Somehow the Grand's old-fashioned mattress must have cocooned them, as they fell 2 stories with rubble and furniture plunging down around them. Now he has to work out how best to reach them.
There were 5 or 6 floors above them that had come down on top of them, so there was quite a lot of rubble and heavy material, timbers, bedding, furniture, baths, all sorts of things above them and around them.
Bishop and his men begin burrowing into the wreckage. They have to be very careful. The heap is dangerously unstable, with tons of material piled on top.
So our biggest problem then was to remove as much as we could, as quickly as we could, to get to them, but without causing a further collapse. So that was quite a big danger.
Well, can you hear me?
Bishop himself takes the lead as they work towards the trapped couple, as fast as they can, because they fear Margaret Tebbit is hurt bad.
But we realised quite quickly, quite early on, that she was seriously injured because she had no feeling.
Being an ex-nurse, she probably had an idea of some kind, and told them that her limbs were cold and she couldn't move.
But she knew at that point that we were concerned about her spine, and of course it turned out she had serious spinal injuries.
After 2 hours of digging, the firemen carefully free Margaret Tebbit and carry her out to the waiting ambulance. Her injuries are critical. They'll leave her permanently paralyzed from the neck down. The way is now clear for Bishop and his men to start digging through to reach Norman Tebbit. But they soon discover the very thing that saved his life is now keeping him trapped. Norman Tebbit knows the firemen are getting closer, but his anxiety and impatience to be rescued are building. To reach him, Bishop's team have to cut through a maze of fallen wreckage. But if they remove the wrong piece, the rest may come down and crush him, and the firemen too. There's no room for heavy equipment in such a confined space.
We use our hands, and we use just hand saws to cut through the timber. We use our knives. All firemen carry a knife in their pocket. We use the knives to cut through bedding.
The very same mattress that saved both the Tebbits' lives in the collapse is now blocking his rescue.
With the timber and such, like, some of it had gone through the mattress, obviously, so you couldn't just drag the mattress out, so we had to cut through all these quite high tensile springs.
Each is just a few centimeters across, but made from extremely strong spring steel. The firemen have to call back for heavy bolt croppers. It's awkward work and time-consuming. Norman can hear what's going on, but it's an agonizing wait. And the firemen have to ensure they don't create more hazards as they cut.
And what we were concerned with was that you leave quite a sharp edge, and so we had to remove the springs piece by piece and cut through them very carefully, because we didn't want the sharp edges obviously to go into Norman Tebbit.
They're like stiletto knives. It takes as many as 100 individual cuts before they clear away enough of the mattress for Fred to reach a hand through. It's Norman Tebbit's first physical connection with the outside world for more than 3 hours.
When Fred grabbed hold of my arm, my hand, I recollect saying afterwards that I'd never held on to another man's hand with quite such an intensity of emotion.
It's only now that Bishop realizes how badly injured Norman is.
At one point I actually felt on his side, because he was in his pyjamas, and obviously they were quite torn and tattered. He had quite a big hole in his side about his hip area.
He's lost a lot of blood. Several of his bones are broken. It's been 3.5 hours, and he's going into deep shock. Bishop knows he now has to get Norman out of the cramped space fast, but he's afraid he might injure him even more. He concentrates on widening the cavity around Norman's body.
Here it's just a case of making it as big as possible, but as quickly as possible, but just sufficient to get him out.
It's slow going, and Bishop feels Norman's injuries as if they were his own.
Every time you moved him, obviously, it was quite painful for him, and you could see that pain etched on his face.
They're now rapidly running out of time.
You know, he was, really quite shocked. So it came to the point where I'd say, right, we're going to have to get him out, otherwise we're going to have big problems here.
Bishop decides they have to take the risk and pull Norman out, but they can't do it on their own. They need Norman.
I've been in situations where my life has been pretty clearly under threat a couple of times. And of course, when that happens to you, your body reacts. All the normal inhibitions on your use of body strength go out of the window.
Norman Tebbit somehow manages to tense his muscles and make his body rigid, raising himself just a fraction of a centimetre, just long enough for Bishop and the others to lift him out of the rubble. Television crews outside the main entrance record the scene live.
If you see the video footage of it, you can tell by his face he was in terrible agony.
There's nothing more you can do. You're safe, and it all switches off. So suddenly you're jelly.
He's been imprisoned in the wreckage for 4 hours. Now at 7 a.m., Norman Tebbit is finally carried free. Greenwatch immediately start tunneling down to someone else, even further into the mound of debris. But before they can reach him, they're ordered to stand down. They're disappointed.
We didn't want to go. I protested that, no, we were almost to another casualty, and having worked that hard to get to him, obviously we wanted to see him come out alive and safe. And so it's a bit of a disappointment in some respects to actually be relieved.
During their time on duty, Station Officer Fred Bishop and the men of Greenwatch have rescued 6 people from the nightmare of wreckage. Now, reluctantly, they have to pull out. For nearly 5 hours, they've risked extreme danger in the ruined building, not least the ever-present threat that more bombs were ready to explode.
Could have caused us even greater problems. And we were quite surprised in the end that there weren't any more. It was quite surprising there's just the one that caused all the damage.
John Wakeham is the man Bishop's men had tried to reach. He's the last casualty rescued by firemen. They carry him clear in the grey morning light, 7 hours and 22 minutes after the bomb exploded. Soon after, the IRA officially confirmed that they had planted the bomb. At 9:25 a.m., right next door to the ruined Grand Hotel, the Conservative Party conference continues on its last day, uninterrupted. Later, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher delivers her closing speech.
The fact that we are gathered here now, shocked, but composed and determined.
She's rewritten it following the horrors of the previous hours.
All attempts to destroy democracy by terrorism will fail.
The party members give her a standing ovation. Many are themselves survivors of the attack on the Grand Hotel. 4 people are dead. 32 others have been injured. Muriel McLean, despite being successfully rescued by Greenwatch, died from her injuries a month later. The IRA inflicted casualties, but failed in its bid to assassinate the Prime Minister and government. Its bombing campaign on mainland Britain was finally abandoned with the ceasefire agreement in 1997.
I suppose if there's one message that ought to go out from all these outrages, it should be that those who perpetrate them gain nothing from it.
Norman, now Lord Tebbit, returned to politics and became party chairman in 1985, but did not go on to succeed Thatcher as Prime Minister. For their part in the Grand Hotel operation, Fred Bishop and 9 other members of the East Sussex Fire Brigade received awards for bravery.
There's almost nothing you can say that would be adequate. They were a very, very brave group of people who didn't think at all of themselves.
To us, it really was another night's duty, and we were called on to rescue people, and that's what we did. That's what our job really was.
In the days following, Margaret Thatcher personally commended the rescuers, describing their efforts as an example and an inspiration to the nation as a whole.